All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel. So my name is Claire Baumkamp. I'm a senior scientist at the Good Food Institute. So today we're going to be talking about cultivated seafood, so also known as cell-based seafood. So this is the idea of growing muscle tissue from a seafood-related species for the purposes of making food, so as distinct from aquaculture. And so we're going to talk about kind of some of the challenges in that field and the problems that we're trying to solve in making that happen. So we're going to hear from a number of really exciting experts and leaders in this area. So I will turn it over to our panel to introduce themselves. Kevin, we'll start with you.
Okay, I'm Kevin Main. I'm with Moat Marine Laboratory in Sarasota, Florida, and I am a research scientist here running the aquaculture research team. And I'm involved with this group because we have a project that's funded by the Good Food Institute to develop cell-based culture techniques for 2 different types of seafood.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I lost you a little bit. Yeah, hi, Sandhya here from Shiok Meats from Singapore. We're a cell-based seafood company that concentrates on crustaceans. So we work on shrimp, crab, lobster, and we are looking to hopefully commercialize in early 2022. Thank you.
Lou, next.
Hi, my name is Lou Cooper House. I'm a co-founder, president, and CEO of Blue Nalu. We're based in San Diego, California, and our company is developing a wide array of finfish utilizing cell-based technologies, and excited to bring product to market initially in a test market, ideally late in 2021, and excited to expand that in the future.
Maisie?
Hi, I'm Maisie Gansler from Bon Appetit Management Company. We run cafes for corporations, private colleges, and museums. And we buy a lot of fish, and we hope to be buying fish alternatives or fish raised in different ways. So excited to be here to talk about that.
Hi, my name is Cameron. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Calgary. I work in the lab of Dr. Alexei Suchenko, and I'm also privileged to be a member of the New Harvest Fellowship Program. They support my research that's relevant to cultivated seafood.
All right, thanks to all of you for joining us. So getting into some of the motivations for why we think cultivated or cell-based seafood is something that the world needs. So let's first hear from Lou and Sandhya on kind of why you decided to start your company. What are the big problems that you think cultivated seafood will solve in the world, and why is the solution that we need? So let's start with Sandhya.
Sure, I can definitely speak for crustaceans. So I think there's a lot of light thrown upon, the red meat and white meat industry in terms of slaughterhouses, the pathetic conditions that they are, and how unethical it is. But not much light is thrown upon how the seafood industry is actually tainted with a lot of problems. So in particular, I can start off with shrimp, for example. Both wild-caught and farm shrimp have their own set of issues. So when you look at wild-caught, there's a huge bycatch problem, especially with shrimps, where these huge nets that are tied to the back of the boats called trawlers are being pushed into the oceans. And this is leading to a 1:20 bycatch, which is completely unacceptable. And this morning, I saw an article on The Guardian that's talking about how we are not going to have any more shrimps in the next 5 years to consume. Like, that's the state of where we are. We are completely unsustainable. We are fishing unsustainably, but at the same time, a lot of shrimp farms, on the other hand, are facing problems with overuse of antibiotics, overload of heavy metals, microplastics in the oceans, for example, and wild-caught shrimps. And then a lot of crabs and lobsters actually cannot be farmed. It's hard to farm them, so they actually have to be wild-caught. And we're not allowing enough time for these animals to breed. So we are going in very early, catching them very early, and we're not allowing them enough time to, replenish in numbers. And given that the entire crustacean meat industry is worth more than $100 billion globally, it just it's a overflowing market and we are not able to meet the demand. And like I mentioned, in the next 4 to 5 years, we're not going to have any more crustaceans. So having seen all of this and heard all of this, and being in Asia where we consume a lot of crustaceans in every form, shape, and size. It's just not a whole shrimp. We use it as a paste. We use it for flavoring. We use it as, we break down the shell into a powder to use as flavoring, for example. So given all of this, it was a industry that needed disruption almost immediately. And we found it very unique that no other cell-based company was working on crustaceans. So we kind of jumped on the opportunity in late 2018. And we said, why not start looking at this set of species and look at how we can use stem cells to grow them. And we did get a prototype in about 6 months of starting the company. And currently we're looking at getting out the first product as shrimp and then following with crab and lobster. So it's kind of a industry that needs a complete disruption, complete overturn of how things are done. On the other hand, if you look at Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, where most of the shrimp farms are, a lot of the mangroves are being cleared for setting up shrimp farms. And this is actually leading to a lot of biodiversity loss, problems with flooding, because mangroves are actually natural barriers for the ocean or the river not flowing into the land. And when you clear them off, this is actually leading to flash floods. So it's not just one issue. It's an issue that's leading to so many different problems, and it's causing issues in people's health, animal health, of course, and at the same time environment. And just last point to add in is, along with COVID, unfortunately, there's been this huge viral disease outbreak that's happened in the shrimp farms in China, and about 400 to 600 farms have closed down just in the last 8 weeks. So you can imagine how that's impacted the food supply chain. Also, the pricing of shrimp has gone up very much because of all of these. So it's a constant problem that the shrimp farmers come across, which is getting rid of this white spot viral disease. And there is no treatment for it at this point. So given all of these issues, we said, let's tackle this set of animals that are devoured by everybody, but we won't be able to eat them in the next couple of years. So why not try to preserve them and grow them using stem cells?
Yeah, and happy to talk also about the issues with finfish at Blue Nile that we're dealing with. And very similar to Sonia's comments about crustaceans, those challenges exist also with finfish. And seafood in general, as we know, people just love seafood around the world. The demand's, in fact, at an all-time high. And as per capita consumption continues to increase, and we just cannot keep up on the supply side. And in fact, as a person who's worked in the food industry my whole career, that one industry identified, when we first started the company, that was arguably the most vulnerable supply chain on the planet is the seafood sector overall. Crustaceans, mollusks, finfish, they're all very vulnerable, really exacerbated by what we're seeing now and from a food security point of view as a result of this pandemic. And what's really the challenge, for example, in finfish, is while demand is increasing and supply is diminishing, we just can't feed the world in the years ahead. And furthermore, in the case of finfish, we have some of the same issues that Sonia mentioned exists in crustaceans, but we have issues with microplastics, environmental pollutants, toxins, and particularly in the case of finfish, we have issues around mercury. So for pregnant or nursing women, they have kind of 3 current recommendations. Please consume 0, 1 to 2, or 2 to 3 servings per week. In the case of cell-based seafood, items like swordfish or tuna, examples like that, a female consumer, any consumer could have as much seafood as they desire, because there is no mercury, there is no microplastics. So what we're doing with cell-based seafood is really not just supplying, a new source of supply, supplementing wild caught and farm raised with, in our case, cell-based, but also creating a more food secure solution for the planet, clearly more sustainable. So as we describe it, it's healthy for people, humane for sea life, and sustainable for our planet. And, on top of that, there's even additional benefits above and beyond all the ones we talked about. For a food service operator, there's also 100% yield. So today we're shipping, say, finfish from Southeast Asia to, say, New York City, maybe it's 7,000, 9,000 mile distance. You know, Sonia mentioned with bycatch that in the case of finfish could be 20, 30, 40% possibly. But there's also 60% yield at the food service operator level as they're filleting that finfish for the restaurant. So imagine if you could replace that, you know, enormous environmental footprint with a factory that could produce cell-based seafood that might be 100 miles away, you know, with 100% yield. So you've totally, you know, reformatted the supply chain with cell-based and really reinvented local by literally putting 100% yielded operation close to market, no longer limited by supply, but instead, you know, able to be opportunistic based on demand, and really creating any species that might make sense based on the market demand in that particular population. Again, without bones, heads or tails, just the fillet, or whatever the product might be. That also has doesn't have the cross contamination that might come from skin or shells. So really provides a far more compelling proposition at every possible level. So we're obviously, you could tell we're all quite excited by the potential for this opportunity.
Thanks, both of you. Lots of really good reasons to be pursuing this technology. So next, I'd really love to hear from Kevin. So your background is primarily in sustainable aquaculture. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more about kind of your journey of coming to realize that, you know, we need cell-based seafood as this complementary solution, and kind of how you see those two things working together in the future.
Okay, thanks, Claire. It's been a journey for me because I have worked in the field of aquaculture my whole career, and I am a strong proponent of aquaculture, especially sustainable aquaculture technologies, and have worked for the past 20 years on improving those methods and trying to develop ways that we can produce the food that we need to feed the world, because we are growing in population size. It's projected that we're going to have over 9 billion people in the world by 2050. So we're going to grow from about 7 billion up to 9 billion people. And as that happens, we are going to need a wide range of strategies to be able to feed that ever-growing population. And fisheries, which there's been some discussion about fisheries has been, or used to be, the way we always thought we were going to get our seafood, right? We thought the oceans were endless and we could get it all from there. And what we've found is that in the 90s that we actually had achieved the maximum amount of seafood that we could harvest out of the oceans around the globe. And so even as techniques have continued to advance for fishing, we haven't been able to get any more fish out of the sea. And so as that happened, we saw aquaculture really step into the game and start to produce those methods to be able to grow food. But with it came a wide range of challenges, and I'd call them challenges like disease. And that's a great one that they were talking about with shrimp, and it also happens with finfish. As you're learning how to grow something in captivity, you've got to figure out how to keep it healthy. Just like when we've got a whole bunch of people in a closed environment, we're trying to figure out right now how to keep people healthy with COVID, right? So we've got the same challenge with animals, whether it's land-based or seafood-based animals, that we've got to come up with good techniques. And so I've been working on ways to do this with less environmental footprint. So that's been the focus of my work for quite some time. But when I learned about this new technology that people were considering developing, which I actually had not heard of it until about a year ago, and I was super excited about it because we have to have lots of ways to produce the food we need in the future. And this is one way that we can produce, I don't know, are we still using the word clean? I'm not sure what it is. Let's just call it cultivated, because clean almost sounds like it isn't food, right? So cultivated seafood is a really unique way to produce a product that's going to go out in the marketplace. And there are as a number of species that we are super challenged with. And Sonia mentioned lobsters and crabs. Those are really hard to grow in aquaculture because they have all these different life stages that they go through. In fact, it can take you a year just to get through the larval stages in lobsters. And so if you're going to be trying to farm those from embryos, you've got a long way to go before you're going to get something that's going to go to market. And so they've used other strategies, especially in Asia, and because they're determined to get that seafood no matter how they can get it, you know. So so this is a really cool and exciting thing to work on, because I see this as one of the multitude of ways that we're going to see food being produced in the future. You know, I'd like to suggest that we'll have sustainable fisheries, sustainable aquaculture, and cell-based seafood culture as ways to help feed this ever-growing population in the world.
Thanks, Kevin. So next, I'd just like to hear a little bit from Maisie, since your background is somewhat similar to Kevin's in that you've spent a lot of time and effort in your career in trying to advocate for better, more ethical, more sustainable production of conventional meat and seafood. So can you talk about your experiences of kind of being an advocate for both of those you know, different routes of producing food?
Yeah, well, I'm very much in the same camp with Kevin that we need to have a variety of ways to produce food to meet a variety of different needs. And the needs from geography to flavor to price points to utilization. We want all the arrows in our quiver. Is that the right way to say it? Not the quiver in our arrows, the arrows in our quiver. Yes. And I believe that with land-based mammal production, with vegetables, with everything. I think it's important for a company the size of ours that serves about 200 million meals a year to keep a hand in each of the potential lines or real lines, and to be a voice at the table for more sustainable practices, be they big ag, big chicken, or big seafood production. That's not going to go away overnight. So we need to have a voice at that table to advocate for more sustainable practices. We need to be a voice to advocate for fishing communities with preserving a way of life and a livelihood for many traditional communities, First Nation or otherwise. We need to be a voice at the table to talk about sustainable aquaculture that provides eco-services like oysters that can actually be filters and help clean up the water around where they are versus polluting as many of the finfish do in aquaculture. And we need to be a voice to talk about leveraging technology and in a responsible way to create new ways of meeting the needs that Sandhya and Lou both very eloquently spoke about, the many problems that their technologies can solve. I'll also add to those lists that the seafood industry has been rife with human abuses in the capture, the processing. Even if you're talking about aquaculture, it's the wild capture fish that go into the feed for aquaculture. And there are, you know, story after story of horrific slavery and abuse. And I would assume that in a more clean production system, the factory that Lou talked about, that we can also have controls over the labor practices as well. We have a chance to build a new industry from the ground up, and we can build it in the way that we would like to see it on many, many levels of value. And so that's exciting as a purchaser. I want to be involved in that too.
Great, thanks, Maisie. So next I want to switch gears and talk about some of the technical challenges in producing cultivated seafood. We've talked about kind of, there's multitude of reasons why this is something we need, but it's obviously not something that, we can just turn around and make happen overnight. So Cameron, you're one of the people who's doing academic research to kind of really build up this fundamental knowledge that we need in order to support this growing industry. So I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about your project and what you hope that will do to make this, this technology closer to a reality.
Sure. So yeah, my background is biochemistry, and in particular protein biochemistry and nucleic acid biochemistry. These might not immediately jump out as a natural fit for cultivated seafood research, but what they do provide is a pretty good basic toolkit for performing research. So there's many reports out there that highlight growth factors, which are important constituents of cell culture media, as major cost drivers of the cost of culturing cells. Some estimates attribute as much as 95%, even more in some cases, of the total cost of the cell culture medium to these growth factors. And these happen to be proteins. So that's kind of where my experience as a protein biochemist come into play. But there's a really kind of pressing gap in terms of availability of growth factors from non-mammals. So there's lots of suppliers out there for, high quality human growth factors and even some other mammals. But if you want growth factors from non-mammals, other species, you can't really buy them. You'd be really hard pressed to find them commercially available. So my project is looking at fish growth factors and attempting to express them, purify them, and then apply them to fish cell culture in the hopes that they'll improve the performance and reduce the cost of culturing fish cells.
Great. Thanks, Cameron. So another big challenge in producing cultivated seafood is the development of the cell lines that are actually going to go into producing these products. And so Kevin, that's your focus. So could you please tell us about that?
Yes, we are real excited at Moat to be involved in what I would call the foundational research for seafood-based cell culture. Just developing the initial techniques on how to turn what we would normally take fertilized embryos and then grow them into fish, but then take those and figure out how to cultivate those cells. And so we have a cell culture team that is currently working with redfish, and that was the species that we chose as we'll call it our model seafood species, because it's a great candidate. It's something that we know a lot about reproduction associated with that fish. So we knew that we could produce lots of eggs, fertilized eggs on demand. And we've been working on producing those, getting them and isolating them, getting clean cultures, and then growing them in the laboratory. And so it's sort of the beginning steps of the techniques, from growing single embryonic cells, getting them to multiply and live in our culture medium. And then the next step will be getting them to replicate and grow and expand. And so we're in the very early stages of this work, but so far it's working out very well. And the other species group that we're going to work with is shrimp. And I know we've talked with somebody over at your company, Sandhya, about this because we are super interested in kind of taking what I'll call the two model species, something that we know a whole lot about, and then developing the baseline culture techniques for them. And then from there, I think somebody already mentioned the fact that, there's so many, when you come to seafood, it's so different from land-based agriculture, right? You got your basic chicken, beef, and pork. We're talking about essentially 3 different species of organisms, whereas with seafood, we eat hundreds of species of organisms, especially if we're going to go to Asia, where they really like to see this whole variety of seafood on the plate. Here in the U.S., you know, we're happy if we can eat tilapia and salmon, right? If we go to, not maybe me, but you know, your basic American consumer. And so that is kind of exciting to think about, starting with these initial ones, developing the early stage techniques, and then turning those over to the next step. You know, that's where our excitement is. And then another area that we hope to work on in the next year is something called myogenesis, where we'll be taking those cell lines and then trying to develop muscular cell tissue out of it. So lots of different things to work on. Thanks,
Kevin. So next, for Sandia or Lou, I'd like to hear if there's, if you want to talk about any of the kind of successes or challenges or both that you've had in these same areas of either cell line development or producing growth factors, optimizing culture media to get the cells to remain healthy and to grow.
Lou, go ahead.
Okay. No, I think this whole category, I think Sonia would agree, and I think that was a great comment by Kevin. This whole category began on the mammalian cell side. So there were some early initiatives in cell-based protein, really working on beef, pork, chicken, et cetera. But there was really a white piece of paper when it came to seafood. There was really no knowledge. Nobody had really ever propagated successfully cell lines in seafood, you know, beyond perhaps some aquarium fish. So this was a brand new category. Didn't know what would work. And our approach at Blue Nile was to really see if we could, you know, develop a platform technology, if you will, that we could really show, can we in fact work on finfish as a broad category, saltwater and freshwater, big differences, species to species, big differences, and really see if we can come up with a process to propagate cells and create, you know, established stable cell lines across a wide array of species. And we have been able to accomplish it from that white piece of paper. We're very excited to say that 18 months after we started with this, we had established several dozen cell lines across a variety of freshwater, saltwater species that are beyond that, you know, that Hayflick limit that sort of defines the immortalization kind of level that we're all looking for in cell line establishment. And we resulted that with a product that was a medallion of fish. So we demonstrated, you know, on the challenge side, it was a blank piece of paper. On the success side, you know, really more or less 18 months after we started, we actually had kind of our focus is that fillet. So we had medallions, in this case, yellowtail, the first species we worked on, that we actually were able to demonstrate could be prepared all the same way that conventional seafood is prepared. Heated, whether it's fried, put in a fish taco and kind of severe frying oil, if you will, or acidified like in poke or kimchi or ceviche. Again, all of which, you know, will naturally want to degrade that material, or prepared in a raw state. So we're very excited that our product, you know, really had the structural integrity that was really key to our success. You know, and that was kind of our model for really demonstrating that our pathway is on course, and now we're ready to really think, you know, more seriously about large scale production. So now we're in the process of going from, you know, the benchtop level and moving our way towards a 2,000 liter capacity over the next year, and enabling us to actually be in a small test market, you know, in the next 18 months or so. And so I think people, you know, years ago thought this was maybe 10 years in the horizon, but the fact that we can actually say that Sonia and I both saying that we're within 2 years of some level of market launch, it's pretty exciting, you know, and that's obviously just, you know, a first step towards large scale production. And obviously next in our challenge collectively is obviously driving our costs down. And, you know, we're committed to doing this in an animal-free serum without fetal bovine serum. We've already accomplished that. and we're the next, as we all scale up collectively, this whole industry, it's really our ability to drive the cost down so we can ultimately be at potentially at price parity or perhaps better than conventional seafood products.
Thanks, Lou. I think I concur with a lot of the points that he mentioned, especially in terms of timelines, pricing, and where we'll be in the next couple of years. But at least, and again, for crustaceans, for us also, we literally had a white piece of paper and nothing. The only papers we could find online, like in terms of previous publications, were groups that were trying to isolate lymphoid cells from shrimp, or probably ovarian cells to the maximum. There was one paper that mentioned they tried isolating muscle stem cells, which is what we use for the meat, and they grew it for 5 days and that's it. There was no technique, there was no protocol, there was nothing. What did they grow it in? Nothing at all. So we literally started from scratch. We had to take some shrimps and literally figure out their entire anatomy and where should we take the best stem cells from, which age is the best, which sex probably. At this point, gender doesn't really matter, but we had to figure all that out. And between Kai and me, my co-founder, and myself, we literally did that from scratch. And it was interesting. It was very intriguing. At the same time, we realized when we did the first cell culture and we realized that the cells could survive, in simple basal media with a little bit of a supplement. And we have been able to grow all our cells without FBS from day one, like Lou mentioned. Honestly, if you think about it, why will fetal bovine serum be required for seafood cells? Like, it doesn't really make sense at this point. So, but traditionally, if you look into the pharmaceutical industry or the reagent industry, you wouldn't find anything else that could grow your seafood cells. You would find all the reagents that are meant for mammalian cells and not for seafood cells. So we had to go a little bit into insect biology because crustaceans actually fall under the insect kingdom. They're not under animals or the fish kingdom. So we had to do a lot of research on the insect side of things and look at where insect cells have grown, even their sizes are as small as insect cells. And when we did the first set of culturing, we realized these cells are actually suspension cells. And we had no clue. We have always been trained to look at cells that adhere to the surface and they're adherent and so on. And we realized these cells don't like to adhere. And that's great because from day one, we could go into a bioreactor or a bioreactor-like setting, which is essentially what's required for cell-based seafood. We don't have to worry about microcarriers, how to get them into suspension, all of that, which is an issue for mammalian cells to start off with. So all of these were, discoveries that we made as we grew the cells. It's very exciting for us. Every time we, isolate cells from different species of shrimp, it's very different for us. At the same time, we've just started some work on lobster, and it's very interesting to see how these cells evolve, the way they look, the way they behave in culture, how long they take to replicate, for example. Even though lobster and shrimp are from the same family, there are definitely stark differences between the two types of cells. But since we've understood a lot of the biology and chemistry behind the shrimp cells, we're able to move faster ahead with the lobster cells. And I assume that it'll be the same with the crab cells as well when we start off in the next couple of months. So for us, in terms of talking about the cell culture media, we have been doing some crazy experiments where we've been swapping out some of the protein components with algal extracts, for example, or extracts from seaweed, because these are essentially what the animals eat in the ocean. And we're just looking at how we can get the broken down extracts. Of course, you can't just feed algae to the cells, but you have to get the broken down extracts in such a way that the cells can absorb it directly in culture. And that's been interesting because these kind of extracts also add to the flavor at the end of the day. So it's been pretty interesting. And I think within Shiok, we always encourage our scientists to kind of try all of these out of the box experiments at the end of the day, we are not doing academic research. We don't need to publish papers. What we need is a product that works, that can be sustainably grown and can be consistently grown with the same quality and the quantity that we want. And it has to be a process that's very well automated from A to Z. And, unless you think out of the box, think a little differently and try different things, you're not going to know whether it works or not. And that's kind of what it is for us.
Great. Thanks, Sandhya and Lou. Sounds like both of you are making awesome progress. So I'm excited to see what the future looks like for both of you. So next I want to shift a little bit to talking about some of the non-technical challenges of kind of how are these things going to end up in the market. So for Maisie, I think your background is really interesting. And you know, you've done so much work in the food industry, you really understand the supply chains and stuff, and kind of understand why it's not often so simple as people who are advocating for a better food system would say, oh, well, why don't you just stop doing this bad thing? And you really are able to use that knowledge to, you know, go in and say, okay, yes, it's hard. How are we going to solve this challenge? So I'm really interested in kind of what you think of as what would you like for consumers who want a better food system to understand about those difficulties and challenges that would help them to be better advocates for a better food system in the future?
Well, I think the first thing is, as you said, it's really complex. And what a lot of consumer advocates think is this simple idea of if a company was willing to pay more, if you would just write a bigger check, we could have a more sustainable food system. And in some sense, that's true, but there's a lot about how you spend that check. And in some cases, it's very unclear how to spend that check. And so if consumers want to better advocate, I think they have to better understand and try to solve problems versus make simple demands. One piece is getting a product, right? Knowing that a product exists somewhere in the world. And even that is not simple. When we talk about, if we use seafood as the example, let's talk about farm shrimp, because we've been talking about that a fair amount today. It's very hard as a US buyer to know where that shrimp came from. And when we talk about country of origin laws, we're often talking about the country of processing. And I was just on a call with the Seafood Watch team this morning talking about the new labeling laws and registration laws for shrimp farms in India. And there's these very tough laws in place, yet you look at, there are only hundreds of farms registered, and we know that there are tens of thousands of farms. So somewhere in between there's a lot of information lost. And if you go to any of these countries with these tens of thousands of farms, you'll see stations where that shrimp is all pooled, where it's all put into literally giant boxes and taken to processing and then pooled again when it's processed. And so when you eventually get to a US buyer purchasing a box of frozen shrimp, to know where it came from beyond the country that it was processed is a very difficult question to answer. And when you start asking those questions, the information that you get is always backwards looking. And what I mean by that is that systems have been put in place for traceability for food safety, and that's always backwards looking. So we are very much able to say, if you got sick from this box of shrimp or this box of apples, then we can take the code on it and we can trace back where that came from. But that tells you nothing about where the box tomorrow is coming from. And there's a lot of flexibility built into these supply chains. Some of it very necessary to have a consistent supply. So if we say we only want to buy shrimp from China, and then there's a disease in China, we have no shrimp, right? So when you start buying shrimp and talking to import companies, they'll tell you, well, the shrimp comes from Vietnam, India, and Indonesia. Well, what percent? Well, it depends on the day. You know, which farms in those countries? Farms that are all very well inspected. You know, what does that mean? And that's talking about the final product of the shrimp, not to mention the feed that went into that shrimp. So coming back to your question, it's very complicated when people start saying, I want to know where my food comes from. I want to know that it was raised in a fair way, that people were treated right along the way. Those are very hard questions to answer. And so I wish that consumers would educate themselves more, pick one area to do a deep dive in, to ask smart questions and try to build coalitions to build answers, not just make demands, because it's much more complicated than just greedy companies doing bad things.
Thanks, Maisie. I think that's a lot of really useful insight. So next I want to talk a little bit about kind of how data and IP interact with this sector. So I think a lot of us probably understand that, you know, success isn't going to come just from companies, you know, finding information and kind of, you know, siloing all of that away. You know, we're going to need some level of collaboration for success. But at the same time, you know, it is what it is, and you can't just put out everything that your company finds because of you know, you need a competitive advantage. So I'd like to hear a little bit from Sandia about kind of how you find the balance between you know, openness and collaboration within the industry, but then also you know, making sure that your own company is successful.
Yeah, I think from day one, we kind of set our strategy on thinking of what we want to own and what we'd like to collaborate on, and what our core mission of the company is. So for us, the core mission is to produce the meat. It's not about producing the growth media or growth factors. It's not about producing a scaffold, for example, if you want to get the textured product. So we decided our core IP and our technology is on how do you isolate the stem cells, how do you store them, how do you grow them, how do you convert them to meat? And that's exactly what we filed for patent for. At the end of the day, we want to license the technology. We're not going to keep it all as trade secrets. We want this industry to grow. And it is a great revenue stream for a company like us if we want to grow fast and spread wide around the world. Since our target market is APAC, which itself is huge to start off with, for the Western market, for example, we'd like to license our technology. I mean, I've spoken to Lou about this. I'm like, in the future, if you want to talk, you know, you want to look at crustaceans, work with us. You know, we'll let you know how to do it, and you can do it because you'll have the infrastructure in place. You already have scientists and engineers on board who know how to deal with seafood and cells from them. So why not work together for the Western market, for example? So we're very open to that. But at the same time, we've constantly been questioned about, why aren't you making your own growth media? We are trying to do that in-house, but we'd ideally like to collaborate with labs and industries that can already do that for us. They already have the expertise. So if you can accelerate that part, why do you have to own everything? You know, it doesn't make sense at the end of the day. So we have partnered with one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world to help us make the first edible shrimp stem cell media in the world. So that's a form of collaboration that we're very open to. And I was just, you know, letting my co-founder know that we have to get in touch with Cameron, for example, to learn a bit more about his research and what we can do together. I know our team has already spoken to Kevin, for example. I've met Macy before. So I think we are all, you know, together in this to get the product out, to make sure that the consumers are educated and they have a choice and they have access to different types of proteins and different types of seafood that's out there. So for us, I think for every company, it's about what you want to own and what you want to let go of, or what you want to collaborate on and be open about it. At the end of the day, I am not going to be a growth factor or a growth media company. That's a separate business of its own. I would rather collaborate with someone else who's already doing that and see if we can purchase from them, license from them at the end of the day, and see how we can then maintain that competitive advantage as well. So I think if you set your strategy straight from day one and you know what you want to be the leader of, then it's easy to kind of go from there.
Great, thanks, Sandia. So this isn't an issue just in the industry. There are also, you know, challenges and disagreements around kind of open sharing of data, publication, intellectual property within academia. So Cameron, can you talk a little bit about sort of your perspectives on collaboration within academia?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, one thing that's kind of paramount in academia is, you we want to publish our data. Publication is the currency of science. So there's always a little bit of hesitance in some instances to share results prior to publication. And what that means is that sometimes results that could benefit this industry now, they might not be accessible for, maybe 1 to 2 years, at which point a project is then mature enough that it will pass peer review. So that's sort of one kind of issue that comes up. And then kind of another issue or difficulty, it's not unique to cultivated seafood, but it's highly relevant, is that, there's a little bit of inherent difficulty with data sharing and collaboration between people working in academia and then, some of these startup companies or bigger corporations that want to get into this space. Obviously companies that are for profit are looking to, advance their goals. Their ultimate aim is profitability. And that means that they need to generate and protect their IP. And that's kind of in contrast to what most academics are doing, which is trying to generate new insights, but then we want to share those insights, publish them, and get them kind of out as widely as possible. So, fundamentally, there's a bit of a kind of clash of ideology there, where the ultimate outcome of the research and investment activity of academia is different than that of sort of the for-profit space. So, that's makes things a little bit challenging. But I don't think it's something that we can't get past. It's just, there has to be sort of special language in place before the collaborations can really take off.
Thanks, Cameron. Anything to add to that from you, Kevin?
I think it's very similar for our organization. We are a private, not-for-profit research institution, and we have many collaborations with other university partners, other institutional partners, and with private industry. And so I would agree with Sonia that what the key factor is, you have to define what is your IP that you are looking to protect. And then you have to, and for us, there's a strong focus on publication of results. So we want to be sure and get that data out. So it's kind of a combination of protecting IP, publishing results, and also making sure that it gets out there and is used. And that's what we care about as scientists. We really want to see this take off and move forward. And so I'm excited when I get to work with private industry, and I do a lot of it because I work in aquaculture. And in this case, we've been talking with companies that Claire's been nice enough to help link us up with. And so in the same space, I see us partnering with those companies and finding ways to work together on this, because I think all of us have that same goal. We really want to see new sources of food out there. As a scientist, I'm super excited about this kind of discovery type research. That's a cool thing to be working on. And so I really like being involved with that. And also just taking tools that I've been using for years to produce fish to help industry move forward. Now I'm producing cells that we're going to see a whole new line of food production coming from. So it's a pretty neat way to go.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So we're getting close to the end of time. So I'd like to hear a little bit from either Sandia or Lou or both of you on kind of where you think the gaps are in terms of talent when you're trying to hire people. Are there particular skill sets that you're looking for where you really wish people from a certain industry would transition into cultivated seafood because your company would love to hire them?
Yeah, go ahead, Lou. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can start. Maybe it's also the same kind of answer to the previous question about partnerships. If you look at this industry holistically, and we're looking for a workforce, there's so many areas that are required. As we all said, this industry began with a white piece of paper. So we need to not just develop the research and the technology, the product development. We're developing food products, so the culinary expertise, the sensory optimization, texture, mouthfeel. Then of course there's operations, engineering, regulatory, market strategy, consumer research. So there's a lot that needs to get accomplished. So this whole industry is ripe for partnerships and really ripe for talent that really wants to enter this space. So if you look at some of the projections that some third-party resources have put together, they're suggesting that this industry could have 35% market share of all global meat consumption by the year 2040, just 2 decades from now. 35% growing at a 41% annual growth rate. Therefore, this industry is on fire, and the opportunities for workforce individuals to really think about this as a huge career opportunity, and for partnerships to be developed is really, should be top of mind for everybody. And just on the prior comment, it's all about partnering with corporations and also universities to really help them develop more education around this career opportunity. We're excited by IFT kind of bringing this to the forefront of the minds of the food technologists that are part of your global organization. And no, I just want to say that it's really encompasses all fields, above and beyond R&D, but certainly everything from marketing, regulations, operations, engineering, and everything in between.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, but yes, hiring is a challenge. I will definitely say that, and I guess Lou will accept that as well. I think 2 reasons for that. First thing, it depends on the geography that you're in. In Asia, startups are very or rather joining a startup is very risky according to the Asian mentality. Even me, for example, starting a company was frowned upon when we first started it. They're like, why are you leaving your well-paid job? And what are you doing? You don't have IP, you have no idea. You just have a crazy thought in your mind that you're going to grow shrimp meat out of stem cells. So joining a startup is risky. Parents don't like it, for example. Yeah, I mean, it's true. And it's not a joke at the end of the day. It's so true that, not me, maybe not my parents, but most of the Asian parents like their kids to be engineers, doctors, or lawyers. Literally, that's what it is. Even being a scientist sometimes is being frowned upon, for example, unless you have a PhD. So it's very typical Asian mentality. And at the end of the day, even if the company is well funded, like for example, we have a runway of another 2 years, and we were looking to hire last year, and people simply came back and said, oh, it's a startup, we're not too sure if we'll get a monthly paycheck. I'm like, I have funding for next 3 years, and I'm sure that I can pay you every month, and I'm paying you what you're earning right now, or even a premium on that. But still people didn't want to join. So we had to literally go hunt them on LinkedIn using our previous contacts and so on. The next issue is a lot of people who have the skill sets don't know that they fit this industry. That's the whole problem. Because, even a chemical engineer who has nothing to do with stem cells, has never touched done cell biology in his or her past, is actually a great skill set that we need, because as scientists and biologists dealing with cell biology, we don't understand the mechanics of a bioreactor. We don't understand the engineering behind it. You need someone who understands that part. I honestly think it's harder for a scientist to understand engineering, whereas an engineer can actually understand cell biology a little easier. So, that's how, so we had to go out there and do road shows and talk to people and tell them, you know what, your skill set actually fits. So why don't you try? Think about it, explore, come talk to us. We'll let you know what we do on a daily basis. And then you can identify that what you're doing currently actually fits into what we are doing. And at the end of the day, it's passion and mission. If you are really thinking about, contributing to an industry that can feed people clean and sustainable and ethical food in the future, then, the passion will take over your skill, and eventually you will try fitting into it at the same time. It is a constant learning process, even for us. I mean, we have all worked, at least Lou has worked in the food industry before, but at least most of my team has worked in the healthcare industry before this. So for us to, tweak our thought processes, the way we do science, the way we do experiments, the way we set up things has to be very different. Even simple things like tomorrow, if one of my scientists goes and buys, decides to order a growth factor, the first question that has to come to your mind is, can we eat it? That should be the first question. will it be permissible permitted by the regulatory authorities? Is it okay for me to buy such a chemical? Will people actually eat it at the end of the day? These are questions that you have to constantly think that you never thought of when you were doing healthcare. Because in healthcare, it is accepted to an extent. Most of the reagents are sold by the pharmaceutical companies, so you can get over it and get to the point where you get the regulatory approval. So I think these are the basic challenges, and I'm sure most of the cell-based companies are facing it. We've spoken to the bigger companies like Memphis, that has millions of dollars in funding, and even they are finding hiring quite tough. So given all of this, it's about letting people know that their skill sets actually fit and how they can mold into this industry. And it's a varied, it's a skill set that we need in various parts that actually all come together, like Lou mentioned.
Great, thanks both of you. Cindy, I think you're absolutely right about needing to reach out to multiple industries and kind of make people realize that yes, your skill set is relevant to this, even if it might not seem like it. So Cameron, I'd like to hear from you if you see any sort of big white spaces within academic research, things that, somebody absolutely should be doing this right now and it's not happening. What do you think are the biggest unfilled gaps?
I mean, things are really improving, certainly in the past year, but there's still a glaring lack of cell lines that are readily available. That's been a challenge for my research personally. Acquiring fish cell lines to test the growth factors I produce on has been challenging. And then if you go kind of outside of fish to, crustaceans or mollusks, I mean, it's even less availability there. So, obviously there's efforts by GFI and other organizations to address this problem. So things are definitely improving, and I'm optimistic that they'll continue to improve over the coming years. But right now, the lack of cell lines that are available to academia. I mean, obviously we've heard today that some of these companies are doing some really, really great stuff, but that's IP. So it's difficult to get your hands on those to do some of this basic research that the industry can benefit from. So I think that, as the cell lines are developed and made available, that will and made easily accessible, then I think we'll also start to see more research into some of the other challenges, scaffolding and media development, that sort of thing, that need cell lines to test their hypothesis and validate their sort of approach. So that's kind of that's sort of the main bottleneck, I would say, at this point, is just the lack of available cell lines. I mean, today, if you wanted to go buy a fish cell line and get it in relatively short order, you're pretty much looking at zebrafish. I mean, with some exceptions. And I've never tasted zebrafish myself. I don't know if anyone else here has, but it's not really a high priority from a food production standpoint. So that's kind of the biggest gap I see right now.
Great, thanks, Cameron. Yeah, I hope the cell line situation will fix itself pretty soon. Kevin is on it, so we can help.
Yeah. I can say this openly, Cameron. I've told my team to reach out to you, but we can send over some shrimp stem cell lines for you to work on. So I will let my team reach out to you, and you can take it from there. Yeah.
Hey, that'd be great. Yeah, I'm planning to actually start producing some shrimp growth factors shortly, so that would be
awesome.
a great opportunity there. So.
Perfect. Yes.
I'm happy to talk to you as well, Cameron.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. great to hear.
All right, we just saw some new collaborations born. So we are about at time. So I just wanted to end on a little bit of a lighter note. So we've heard about all the kind of big societal and environmental problems. It's something, cultivated seafood, I think, is something that we desperately need for a number of reasons, but it's also just really cool and fun. Like, ultimately, we're talking about food, and that's awesome. So personally, I'm really excited about kind of the fact that these products are going to be produced under sterile conditions. And I think we're going to see sashimi as a breakfast food because you can have it in your fridge overnight. And I'm just super jazzed about that. And I know that's not the reason to do this, but I'd love to hear from any of the panelists, what is that thing for you? Why are you personally just so excited to have this stuff on the market? Whether that's a food product or any sort of thing in which it's going to change the way we live our lives.
I could start this. First of all, this what we're all doing is something that is so transformative, For me, in a career of food innovation and food technology, and a member of IFC, by the way, for over 30 years, this is it's just a unique opportunity to do something that can really benefit mankind and fish kind, if you will. So as we describe our mission, it's healthy for people, humane for sea life, sustainable for our planet, creating a more food secure world, particularly now more than ever. So it's a rare opportunity to really do something that can be so transformative and make such a difference. So I think we're all aligned around that theme. And it's certainly for those that are intellectually curious and love doing things that have never been done before, this is the industry to really get involved with.
Yeah, I will also step in. I'm really excited to be involved with this because I see it as yet another way to produce seafood, which people are really going to be needing in the future. Land-based production of food is going to be limited as freshwater resources are stressed, and we've got to have really unique ways to produce food in the future, and I see this as one of those great opportunities.
Yeah, I think for me, the excitement is being able to use science to make food. At the end of the day, every food product is an outcome of science. Whatever experiments you do in the kitchen is part of science as well. So literally, I think using my education and skill, or even my team's education and skill, to actually make a sustainable food product that we all can enjoy at the end of the day, I think that's what motivates us on a daily basis. And we just recently started a weekly 10-minute call between the team where we've set each of them to come up with the craziest idea that they can in terms of cell-based seafood. Like, it can be like, I want to go to space and do something. It can be the craziest idea, but come up with it, talk about it, something out of it can come out at the end of the day, and we can try it if it's not too expensive. Let's go ahead and try it. And at the end of the day, that might be what works. So, that's how we encourage and motivate our team. And at the end of the day, what we are very passionate about is consumer education, because we can keep talking about a great technology, a great product, but at the end of the day, you have to sell it. You have to get consumers to buy it, and they have to enjoy it and come back and buy it. Repeatability is so important in the food industry. So consumer education is such an important part of what we do on a daily basis. We're happy to answer any question that people write to us, they post on social media. We're happy to get back to them with answers. We're happy to, explain to them what our technology is without, of course, divulging into confidential information, but happy to give them as much insight. Because as Macy said, the traceability and the transparency of the food industry is completely lost. And that's what we have to bring back and tell people where their food actually comes from, where it's not processed, but actually comes from, how it's grown, what is fed to the animal, or what is fed to the cells, and then what you're eating at the end of the day. All that matters. So as long as we can maintain that traceability and transparency with the consumers, they will believe us more and they will come back to your product as much as they can.
And I'll just add, as somebody who's somewhat of a bystander watching this all happen, it's for me akin to the space race of there's all these super smart people. I mean, just what we've heard today is a great example of it, who are passionate about using technology to break into a new frontier. And that's fun to watch, and I look forward to tasting it. And I think, like space exploration, there's going to be a huge number of knock-on products that come from these technologies that we haven't imagined yet, that are going to change many, many things in our lives. And I'm just excited to watch it and be part of it.
I guess the only thing I would say is, as somebody who grew up in a landlocked province, anytime you vacation to the coast, you always anticipate getting, fresh catch, fresh fish, and it's, everyone remarks how much better it tastes because it hasn't, been transported, frozen or whatever to the inland. So, with the approach of cellular agriculture, and the kind of liberation of production from the coasts, particularly for saltwater species, the accessibility to kind of fresh fish inland is exciting, and I think a cool kind of product or outcome of this technology.
Great. Thank you all for your sort of moment of inspiration. I'm personally really excited right now. Okay, so thank you so much to our panelists for being here. Thank you to you for watching, and we'll look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.